to the Home Assistant Podcast, episode number 23. Joining me, as always, is Rohan. How's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And a very special week this week, a very big week for Home Assistant. So joining us today is the one and only founder of Home Assistant, Paulus. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So tell us what's going on in Home Assistant land this week.
Yeah, so going on in Home Assistant land is that I have joined Ubiquiti Networks as a full-time employee, focusing my efforts on Home Assistant. And Ubiquiti Networks is a manufacturer of, they're all over the place, but they mainly focus on like network equipment and high-end consumer experiences. They're mainly known inside our community for all their network gear. So they make very good access points, and they make routers and switches, and it all ties together very nicely. And so, yeah, they reached out to me because they saw that a lot of their users are using Home Assistant, and they also want to integrate, their gear with Home Assistant. And they were like, let's reach out and see if we can support Home Assistant. And that's where I'm now.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So I guess you've left your previous job and now you can focus full-time on Home Assistant. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was on parental leave. I live in California, and that's where you get 12 weeks of parental leave. So since December, I was on parental leave. And while on parental leave, they reached out to me. And so I kind of transitioned, like after my parental leave, I just started at Ubiquiti.
Oh, that's awesome.
This week. It started on Wednesday.
So California, and I think Ubiquiti was in New York, is that right?
Yes. Well, they're all over the place, but the office I fall under is New York.
Okay. So do you have to move to New York for that?
I'm in New York right now. So the weather is not as good as in San Diego, I can tell you that.
No.
Yeah, I bet.
I imagine. So what does Ubiquiti get out of this deal? They're not getting any ownership of Home Assistant or anything like that?
No. So it was very important to me that I did not want to get into any deal with if we would have to give up any ownership or give them an influence in the direction. So what Ubiquiti gets out of it is that they will, obviously Home Assistant will get better, and they want to look eventually to see if Home Assistant can run on their hardware. There's nothing set in stone right now. And of course, this is also something for their users because there's so many Home Assistant users among their users. So this is also giving back to their users in that sense.
Yeah, right. And so will you be just a normal employee there? Will you have your own dev tasks to do for Ubiquiti, or will you just be focused on Home Assistant?
I will just be focused on Home Assistant. I will not build any Ubiquiti gear or anything like that. So I'm a remote employee, and so they want me to work on things that I actually I will work on. Sorry, that's not what they want per se, but I will work on getting Home Assistant easier to configure for users. This is a project that I actually started already a couple of months ago with the configuration entries.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the next release, 067. It's going to be the first release that will have configuration entries active. And the idea is that you can configure Philips Hue through the UI without interacting, writing any YAML files, which was already possible previously using the configurator. But now with the new setup, you can also remove Philips Hue on the fly without restarting. And this infrastructure is what I've been building for the last few months, and I plan on adding more components to this, so we can just we can, when it comes to setting up new devices, you no longer will need any YAML.
So it will all be web based. Yeah, that is huge.
Yeah, and so I've been, and the other thing that actually Ubiquiti wants me to work on is users and permissions.
Oh, so that's actually been a very big, I've seen that a few times posted as a feature request, the ability for, a tablet to have a restricted user. And then, is that the sort of user and permissions you're looking for in Home Assistant?
Yeah, well, we're going all in. So yeah, our current system is pretty weak because we have one password and you share it with everything that needs to access Home Assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And then one password has all the permissions, right? And so as we are building more and more stuff to help configure through a user interface, it means that the API becomes more dangerous, right? And so we need to be able to secure that down. And so we have an architecture repo in the Home Assistant repo organization where we've been like discussing the user authentication flow. And I just published a diagram of like how I expect this to work 3 days ago. And the way I'm thinking about it's going to work is that there will be flexible authentication backends. So there will be one that just points like keeps a local user database, but you could also maybe log in with your Home Assistant cloud account into Home Assistant, or you could access maybe even with Facebook if we want. And so having different authentication backends, and then there will be users, and there will be like an administrator who can add users, remove users. And then there's going to be permissions. So there are going to be users that can only control states. There are users that can configure Home Assistant. There will be users that configure the users in that sense. Yeah.
That's
Do you have
great.
any plans to make it device level? Only this user can control devices in the bedroom and this user can control devices in the living room, for example?
I'm building the system up in a way that we can do that in the future. It's not going to be on the roadmap initially. And the big challenge with limiting the scope is that it's what if you target a script and then that script will call another script and then that script will call like your bedroom. Like we have to keep track of all the permissions down the line of all the scripts. And that might be a bit more challenging.
Yeah, I can see that as being a very big challenge.
Yeah.
So right now it's just going to be the first version of users is going to have 0 permissions. As in, like everyone will have the same permissions as we have today. But once the initial foundation is in place, we can like iterate on it and move faster.
Right. That's pretty cool. So will you be like kind of removing or rejecting components that will be that might be competitors to Home Assistant, or is that going to be kind of a separate?
Competitors to Home Assistant?
Competitors to Ubiquiti.
No, absolutely not. I think that this is another. So, one thing that I wanted was very important is that we keep our independence. And the other thing is that I'm not going to add specific code because, or reject other components or code because Ubiquiti wants this. We have, of course, device and manufacturer specific code in all our integrations because that's how the integrations work. Mm-hmm. But on a core level, I mean, we have always been very flexible in like how Home Assistant can be configured and where people can hook into the system, right? Like with custom components and custom panels. And, that should be enough, right? Like this should not, I would never ever, not for Ubiquiti or any other company that would pay me add any specific code for vendors. I would, of course, if somebody wants to add some hooks in other parts of the system because they want to integrate Home Assistant, right? Like we can add generic hooks like custom components, custom panels, but we would never ever have specific code or reject any code from competitors, right? Like the only components I've ever rejected for Home Assistant were related to like torrent trackers. And like illegal activity, I would not like want to have inside Home Assistant.
Right.
But otherwise, like people, like we want to have as many integrations, right? Every integration makes Home Assistant more attractive.
100% agreed. Yeah,
totally agreed. So, do you think there's plans for Ubiquiti to sell an off-the-shelf like Home Assistant hub or something like that, and that's why you've been brought on?
There's no plans that I know. The only thing they said is that they might eventually look into running in a Home Assistant on one of their hardware. But I don't know which hardware because their hardware is all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not in the loop of that.
Interesting. Okay. So between Home Assistant and Ubiquiti, are you guys thinking of making better kind of integrations, like different APIs for things like motion detection, things like that?
I'll definitely be looking into the gear that Ubiquiti has. I'm still, because it's only been 2 days, and so I'm still learning about all the different product lines and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I'm definitely going to look into the current integrations with the Ubiquiti gear and see which parts we want to improve. Right, because they have some local IP camera gear that would be cool to have in Home Assistant. I think I'm not 100% sure if we already have an integration for it or how good it is. But yeah, I mean, I'll be looking into like making sure that like those integrations work well.
Right.
So I guess now you've got a bit more time on your hands. Are there any? I mean, when we do projects, if I had full time to work on my Home Assistant config, there's a lot of things I'd automate. What are some of the tasks that you've had, on the back burner for Home Assistant that now that you have can really dedicate a full time on it that you could excited to get into Home Assistant?
Well, I think that's going to be the configuration entries and like the user being able to configure everything through the user interface. That's something that I've said this in podcasts in the past as well, is that being able to build a user interface for users that they can do everything through the UI is a lot of work. And that work is not something you can do in your volunteer time, like on the side and in the weekend. And so now that I can focus on it full time, I should be able to make a lot of progress on this. One thing I will not spend more time on is like reviewing pull requests. I think if I look at like how I can spend my time, I will like review pull. I will still obviously review pull requests, but I'm not going to make it my full-time job to get it to like 0 pull requests. Just because every pull request adds a new feature to like an integration of Home Assistant, and I really want to focus my time. I think it's best spent on focusing on building the foundation of Home Assistant and extending that for other people to build cool stuff on top of it.
It's a bit like, if you're a manager or owner of a company, if you're working inside the company, you're not working on the company. And so if you're busy doing pull requests,
Yes.
It's hard for you to be, pushing forward with the ideas for the configurator and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So in December, you announced Home Assistant Cloud with the initial Amazon Echo offering. Does the announcement with Ubiquiti change anything to do with the paid Alexa cloud service that you offered?
No, nothing at all. So this is another thing that was very important to me, is that Home Assistant Cloud will stay independent from Ubiquiti. Home Assistant Cloud will launch, it's already Alexa's launched, and Google Assistant has been certified, but is internally being tested at Google now and will launch soon. And that plan will just continue independent of Ubiquiti. And this is important to me because Home Assistant Cloud will generate a revenue stream for the Home Assistant project. And so that means it's also like a fallback, right? Imagine that Ubiquiti will ever wants me to do stuff that I don't want to do. I will be able to quit and still work on Home Assistant. And also with the revenue stream, we're going to get Pascal to work on HasIO is the plan. This obviously is like down the line, but we want to also get more resources to HasIO for building images faster, getting better test gear to Pascal.
Yeah, because I guess, everything has a cost. We've discussed this in the past, there's lots of donations that people are using, like they're donating server resources and time, and there's a lot of things that money would definitely help the project.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have, and I only just mentioned Google Home, do you have an update on any time frame of when it will be available in the Home Assistant Cloud?
It's we're in the final stage of the Google Home or Google Assistant certification, and let me elaborate on that process because it was way more involved than with Amazon Alexa. Oh, I should not have said that. Sorry. So to get our skill approved for Google Assistant, I had to ship 2 Raspberry Pis running HasIO to a Google test company that Google has contracted to test their skills that are going to be published. And so I had a QA person, open Home Assistant, like plug it into their local system and use their iPhone to connect and configure a Nest and a Wemo and a Philips Hue, and then connect to Google Home, and then test through a set of like sentences that they are saying, like change the color to this, change the brightness to that. And so the first time this test actually ran, we failed spectacularly. I thought I had all the cases covered, and I did some tests locally, but there were some things that failed. And so that's why one of the reasons why I just recently rewrote Philips Hue was to make it more predictable and make it actually work with Google Assistant. So that we passed the physical tests. And after the physical test, now Google is internally testing the Home Assistant skill. So they have like a dog food program. And once it's through the dog food program, it will be released publicly. And so I cannot give any timeline because I'm not in control, but it should be soon.
Bit like, launching an app for Apple on the App Store, and it's up to the gods at Apple to decide when it gets finished, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize how rigorous the Google's process was for submitting something like this, right? Which I'm actually kind of glad to hear it is.
No, yeah, it was a surprise to me too, because for Amazon, you make a instance of Home Assistant available somewhere in your, like I had it like hosted on a server, and you just give them the credentials to have it connect to an Amazon device, and then they will just test it remotely. They don't have to be like seeing the device, touching the device, and actually talking to it.
Right.
And Google had that test. That was like their initial test, and I was like, oh, it's the same. And then they were like, congratulations, you passed the first phase. Now please ship us physical hardware.
That's funny.
Wow. I wonder if that plays into how, like, there's a bit of a skill shortage. I know a lot of people complain that Google Home doesn't have as many smart home skills as the Amazon Echo does. So I wonder if, this barrier to entry, like having to ship a physical device, plays into that.
Maybe. I mean, it will delay with a month or two, but I think the bigger thing is that the Google smart home skills are still being developed very much. And so the number of available traits are limited. So there's toggles, there's switches, there's temperature control, and I think vacuum cleaners, like robo vacuum cleaners, they have support now for. But I mean, they're still building it out as well. They're just, they started a year or two later than Amazon, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Got a bit of catching up to do.
No, that's interesting. So what's the deal with freebies? Do Home Assistant users get discounts or freebies on Ubiquiti gear, or?
I don't know. I don't think so. I have not discussed this, but I mean, I know that like Plex has these partnerships, right, with people to get like discount on certain gear.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe something for Home Assistant cloud users. But no, there's nothing planned right now.
I have to ask.
That's okay. We trust you'll make it happen, Paulus.
Well, congratulations. That is, really big changes to Home Assistant this week, and I think it's going to make 2018 a very exciting year for Home Assistant.
I think it's going to be awesome. Yeah, from now on, I would expect our pace of development to be like a lot faster, right? There's all these ideas that were just like I could not tackle it because it would take like 5-6 days full-time working on it, and it's not something you can put in the weekends and the evenings, and while also reviewing pull requests and running the rest of the organization. And so now, just during the day, I'll just get my cup of coffee in the morning and I can just work on it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And you'll get to work from wherever you are in the world at that time.
That's right.
All right, well, this weekend or this week brings out Home Assistant 0.67, and there are some new components that we need to talk about as well. So the first component up is the new folder watcher component, which allows Home Assistant events to be fired when a file is added to a folder. So this will be cool if you've got any Ubiquiti gear that might be maybe some cameras or something, putting some JPEGs into a folder for us. That'd be nice.
Yeah, trigger an action when you see a picture, maybe some processing or something like that. That's kind of
Telegram chat room or something.
Yeah, I think the driver, so the person that made this, what drove the person to contribute this component was he has an IP camera, I think, with motion sensor on it. And so whenever it detects motion, it will upload a file to a certain folder. And now he has like a motion sensor and he can like send that video or picture out to his phone, for example.
I guess you could also combine it with the download component as well. Once whatever the download component's downloaded for you, pop it in a folder and then let Home Assistant move it somewhere or send you a message to tell it it's done.
Yeah. So another component we've got, free DNS. So we see another dynamic DNS provider in here, which is good to see. Gives people more options for exposing their instance. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Another one I'm really excited about is the Google Maps presence detection. I actually thought Google had removed this option to share your location. apparently it's still there, and if you want to use it, you can add it to Home Assistant now, and Home Assistant can use Google Maps, which is on any Android phone, and if you don't want to use Apple Maps, you've probably already got it on your iPhone. You can then share your location data with Home Assistant, so that's a very good new device tracker, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm just reading the description as well, and it says it allows you to track Android devices without battery impact. So that's huge.
Yeah. I remember I was watching using own tracks or something, and the battery, depending on how much interval you wanted to track your location, it could drain your battery very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It's I don't know, that almost seems like a very bold statement, right? So I'm hoping for Android users that that's true. If that's the case, that's amazing.
I don't know.
So I think what's happening is that your phone is already reporting its location to Google, and so I think I glanced briefly at like the package they're using, but I think they're just logging into your Google account and seeing where the phone is currently located, or the last reported location of the phone.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think there was an iOS one, but it could drain your battery because it would actually log into the Find My iPhone feature, which would then would then turn on the GPS on the iPhone every, minute or something, which would drain the battery. But if I'm reading this correctly, Android already sends your location in the background anyway. It's part of the Google timeline feature and all that. So if there's no extra calls needing to be made, then there's no extra data drain or battery drain on your phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which makes sense. Yeah, that I actually used to use the iCloud component, and it would destroy my usage. Sorry, not my usage, my battery.
Yeah, the big driver there is that you need to have Google location history turned on, I think. But what is happening on Android is that Google will detect on the phone if you're moving or not, and when is the right time to get a GPS fix. Maybe it will schedule together with other apps that want to have GPS fixes. And so it's very efficient. The iPhone one would indeed just wake up the iPhone, have it capture the GPS, and then report back, which was not scheduled together with all the other apps that might want to get a GPS fix.
Yeah, that's wicked. There's also a Waze travel time sensor added. So, how long it's going to take you live, basically, to go from point A to point B. So from home to, maybe work or something like that.
I love Waze.
That's using Waze as a backup.
Did you Waze for GPS navigation?
I use Waze all the time. I love
amazing.
Waze. Even when I'm going to places that I know exactly how to get to my work from my house, but I still have Waze on all the time. And I'm a huge, I'll report stuff and I consume the reports and stuff as well. I love the concept of Waze.
Yeah, I can't wait to try this one out. I can see in the docs there, it's only available for some regions. I'm hoping I can just put in Australia and it will just work, but I'll find out soon.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's because I don't believe Waze is available everywhere. So I'm guessing you can use this where Waze is available.
Oh, see, I didn't know Waze had an API. I just thought it was the app. And now I'm seeing this travel time component. I'm like, I didn't realize they had an API. So that's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Waze was always pretty innovative, right? That's why Google acquired them at some point. It was, if I remember correctly, they were just layering on the social data on top of Google Maps. So almost enhancing Google Maps there. Right?
And now I think they've gone the other way. I think Google now brings in data of Waze reports into Google Maps. So if you're just using the standard Google Maps for turn-by-turn direction, anyone that's using Waze, they'll share that data in the background and then apply that to Google Maps for those users that don't have Waze.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it brings a human element into Maps, right? Because it's typically how Maps calculates travel time and stuff is based on your location, which is, hey, has my car stopped, right? And okay, based on that, that's now adding time. But now if it sees a lot of cars stop, okay, well, let's flag it as a busy road or something, right?
Exactly.
So,
another new component is the Nanoleaf Aurora. These are. Have you seen these? The cool smart lights.
Yeah, these are pretty cool. I don't know if you've seen them. They're it's one of those things where it's kind of gimmicky, but I love these things. They look
expensive. They look very cool. Good to If you had a nice feature wall
Yes, they
that
do
could
look like
use some lighting, this is what you want to put on it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a bunch of some little updates as well. There's Tahoma switches added. Amcrest IP cameras now have a switch. And there's a new notification service as well, so that's always handy. Some breaking changes. The default Pylight port number has been changed. So if you're using Pylight, you'll need to update it. It's been moved to 5001 instead of 5000.
Yep. And then BMW Connected Drive, they've changed the config key based on your region now. Sorry, the config key country based on the region.
Because I think the USA and Canada
like USA.
weren't being supported, so they've had to update that.
Yeah.
Oh, look, another expensive car I can't afford. The Mercedes API has been removed, so if you have a Mercedes, you can no longer interface it with Home Assistant. Sorry.
Yeah, the problem there was, I think that Mercedes did a complete overhaul of their API, breaking our old integration. Like, it no longer worked.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, because I was just going to ask if you had any insight into how that happened. So that's interesting. Okay. We've also
that's the problem with unofficial integrations. Like, it's if they decide to change their API, make a breaking change, or just remove it, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah. No. Fair enough. There's also for media players. There's a new media type called media type movie. So that's kind of cool. So now you can fire off automations when a movie starts playing on a media player that you have.
I think this brings some good consistency amongst all the platforms. I know for example, if you're using Plex, you would have to go into the Plex attributes and find out what sort of movie, like what type of, video is playing. Then, okay, it's a TV show. Oh, it's a movie. Okay. But I think the most common use case is, when a movie starts playing, dim the lights. So now I think it's consistent across all the platforms. You can work out what type of video is playing easy.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But it is a breaking change.
Yeah, so this release, I already touched upon it a bit earlier in the podcast, is going to introduce configuration entries. And actually, configuration entries, I haven't published much about it yet outside of like the source code. But it's going to be a new way how we're configuring Home Assistant components. And it will no longer store it in YAML. Instead, it's going to be stored, like Home Assistant will take care of storage. It's going to be used for mainly the authentication of like bigger pieces, so like Philips Hue, and like account info that you don't per se want to store in YAML. And the goal that we're having here is that we will also store like a version number, like a versioning system for what's the format of the configuration. And so when a component gets updated in a future Home Assistant version to have different configuration keys, etc., we will be able to migrate the configuration. And so we should no longer have any breaking changes, for example, for Philips Hue. Because Philips Hue, we store the configuration format, and if we would have to have more information or like move things around slightly, we can just migrate the existing configuration.
So how do you see
cool.
People being able to share their configurations with it not being stored in YAML anymore? Do you think there'll be like an export or import feature?
So we're not going to get rid of YAML, or that's going to be around. And the way I see it initially is that I was looking around and looking at the types of configurations that are being shared. And if you look at what people are sharing, they don't share that they have Philips Hue set up, right? Or the authentication for it. They don't share their Spotify. Look, I have Spotify set up. Instead, the things that people share are groups, automations, scripts, and templated sensors and templated anything pretty much. So for configuration entries initially, I'm going to focus on making components configurable through the UI, only the ones that you wouldn't per se share. But for example, in the case of Philips Hue, we have decided that we will still allow people to configure through configuration.yaml, but we'll convert it to a configuration entry on the fly. And so actually introducing configuration entries for Philips Hue in this release is a backwards compatible change.
Neat. Okay.
And from a coding perspective, we have the requirement that all configuration entry code is covered by tests.
So you reduce the risk of,
That's
a future
interesting.
release bringing in a bug to something.
Yeah, so we should be able to have make sure that we catch all the bugs, and we have a certain quality that we can guarantee of like, hey, you're configuring this through the user interface, and this is how, and then it will just work. And kind of my goal, and I hope we can get there by, I don't know, somewhere this year, is that I want to be able to have Home Assistant use configuration entries for like the more popular components. And then if we also have users, then we got a pretty solid system going on where maybe you might not have to touch configuration.yaml if you are a beginning user.
If you can cover off, main use cases, and I'm sure you might be able to see this in the background with the statistics that you gather of Home Assistant users. You can gather, all right, mainly people use the Hue component, and maybe they use the Sonos component. If we can cover off, at least those two, and that's 98% of our users, then we've got 98% of our users that would never have to touch a YAML file.
Yeah, and the way I see it is that if all the simple tasks are possible through a user interface, we can reach a whole wider audience, will have access to Home Assistant. And then if you want to do the advanced stuff, right, you'll have to go into YAML. And maybe in the future that will too become a user interface, but it's just going to be tricky because there's a lot of advanced stuff possible, and I don't think we can really capture that in a user interface. But so we'll keep the text files around for all the pro users, and for the simple users,
Do you
we'll
have any
focus on the user
plans
interface.
to
That's awesome.
change or bring in an automation editor? I know a lot of people now are starting to use Node-RED. Do you have any idea on how we could bring in a sort of an easier way to create advanced automations without using YAML?
Well, we have an automation editor, right, in our configuration panel, and we have a script editor. They are not the easiest to use, and there's definitely some user interface like optimizations we could do, but you can create and update automations today completely on the fly through the user interface already.
And do you think there's a space for those to for that to get any a complete WYSIWYG? I'm thinking, as a new user, if I want to set up an automation and I'm going through the whole flow of setting up Home Assistant, maybe the ability to, similar to a Node-RED, drag and drop automations in place. Do you think that's somewhere Home Assistant will be heading towards?
I don't know about the drag and drop. Like Node-RED, they have a very nice designer tool for automations where you have the flows and how data flows. But I also think that what Node-RED, it's still very complicated, right? I feel I almost want to get to a way where we can almost have templated automations. So we have, for example, a component that will provide an automation to turn the lights on when the sun is setting. Right, we have it in Home Assistant. Maybe that's a component that we should allow people just to toggle on and off, for example, right? And have just fill in the entities it wants to go with. If we want to go to a very advanced editor, that's just a lot of work, right? And I think Node-RED is from IBM, and they just have full-time developers working on just that user interface. And I think at this point for Home Assistant, that's not going to be a focus.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Fair enough. So one of the things you mentioned, Paulus, is you might store things like possibly passwords and API keys and stuff internally within the config entries. So how does that affect, for example, Docker users like myself, where the container might not necessarily be persistent, right? So, i.e., I might be killing a container and then opening it up again. Is that still part of that still going to be exported somewhere, maybe in an encrypted file or something like that? Or
yeah, we're going to store that in the configuration directory.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the configuration entries, I'm also going to tie in more closer with the entity registry that we launched a few releases ago.
Yeah.
So soon you will be able to see for which configuration, entry, for example, your Philips Hue, and it will then be able to show you all the devices that were added as part of that configuration entry.
Okay.
And when you remove your configuration entry, we will also be able to clean up your entity registry optionally, because those entities will not be coming back.
yeah,
That's
cool.
neat. Okay.
All right.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So some other notable changes. Phil, this will make you happy. There's some new device support for Xiaomi air humidifiers.
More Xiaomi gear, yes.
And you can use their Wi-Fi repeater as an integration, or the Wi-Fi repeater as a device tracker as well from their integration there.
Xiaomi is like the one-stop shop for like everything now. It's just crazy.
I was just reading, I think Bloomberg posted an article that there are rumors that Xiaomi might be interested in acquiring GoPro.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's huge. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's indeed very interesting.
That is. Yeah, I just got my introduction to the Xiaomi ecosystem with the Mi Flora
The plant sensors.
devices, which exactly, yeah. I don't have a green thumb, so I figured maybe that could help me out a little bit.
All right. Also in this release, HomeKit now has support for color temperatures. I assume you can now ask Siri to change the color of your light bulbs, and also trad-free from IKEA, the light bulbs, they get color temperature support now too, which is interesting. I thought that would have been like a standard feature, but interesting that didn't come out.
Yeah. There's also some authentication config changes for Hue. So again, backwards compatible.
I think that's what you were talking about before. Is that right, Paulus? In this release?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the configuration entries for Philips Hue, yes.
And now the lady that shall not be named for the Amazon Echo, she now gets support for thermostats, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's handy. That's one of the things I thought that was that I was trying to use. I was like, okay.
So
I guess we're not doing that one yet.
Well, that's actually because of that pull request. I was together with the author of that pull request. We were looking at how we currently do our climate integrations, and we realized that it's kind of a mess. We are conflating the mode and the current operation of the climate devices, and so we're going to actually do a cleanup there, because even like today, the Alexa integration will work fine with Ecobee and Nest, but a bunch of other climate devices have not exposed the correct operation modes, and so that will not be possible. But we're going to do a cleanup, and I expect it to land in a release or two to make sure that we align all the climate integrations.
Like the Wild West out there. There's so many different ways that they each talk or have their own language of how they're going to talk to each sort of device. Is it a thermostat? Is it an air conditioner? Is it a humidifier? They're all sing all over the shop.
Yeah.
Bluetooth device trackers can now request the received signal strength. So have you guys heard of Room Assistant, which is a little Docker image you can run on a Raspberry Pi? It allows you to detect whereabouts in your home a phone is, or a Bluetooth tracker, and then you can use it for room detection. And so this is the same sort of principle. You can now determine how far away a phone is from your Bluetooth tracker.
That's interesting. Okay. So now does that mean I have one of these things in every room, and then I can say, okay, if you're within, I don't know, like 5 meters of this thing, that means you're in this room. Yeah,
exactly.
That's neat. Okay. So because we're pulling in the RSSI and then we can match it that way, that's actually
I guess it could also be useful if you're, maybe in an apartment complex and you want to work out, how, you might connect to your Bluetooth but be in a neighbor's apartment or something like that. You can now use it to determine how close you are to your Bluetooth tracker to say, yes, you're home. No, I'm not home yet.
That's neat. Okay. There's also some new features added for regex matching as well. So essentially, we can start using regex within the templates for using these helper functions. So regex_match, regex search, regex replace. So that's for people that like regex.
I'm a real big fan of templates in Home Assistant, and I can't wait to see some of the stuff that's going to come out with these functions.
Yeah, it's my problem is I hate dealing with regular expressions. I have to deal with them all the time, and they're the worst.
But they're so powerful.
They are.
And I think that really covers off the 067 release. Paulus, is there any other big announcements you want to make while you're here? Just get them all out at once.
No, I think I've done my big announcement for this week.
Don't want to launch a new feature for Home Assistant while you're here? Okay.
We'll do that in the next podcast.
That's perfect.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening today. If you have any questions for us, or maybe you've got a favorite automation you want to share with us, feedback@haspodcast.io. Paulus, thank you very much for joining us, and congratulations once again. Cheers, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.